I have a thing for blue glass and for gin. So when I was at a food festival recently and saw a booth with gorgeous blue bottles filled with gin, I made a beeline over. There I met the owner of Grey Whale Gin and found their story so interesting and the gin so unique, I asked if they'd be a guest on our podcast right then and there. I'm Courtney Drake McDonough, and I'm the host for the Real Food Traveler podcast and the publisher of the realfoodtraveler.com website. And my guests today are Marsh and Jan Mokhtari, husband and wife, and co-owners of Grey Whale Gin, which is based in California. So welcome both of you, and thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Courtney.
So let's start with what is an overall description of your company and the products you offer?
Well, our little company is called the Golden State Distillery, and we really make one product, and that product is that beautiful blue bottle that you just alluded to, the Grey Whale Gin. And it's very distinctive, as you said. It's in a beautiful blue pack with a white whale tail on the front of the bottle. And the reason for starting this company, simply put, is to protect and preserve the world's oceans through our support of Oceana and 1% for the planet. And all of our ingredients happen to come from that beautiful migratory path of the California gray whale, which is down in Baja. And she migrates. She actually has her babies down in a beautiful little lagoon called the San Ignacio Bay Lagoon. And they migrate up to the Arctic, all the way up in Alaska, and then back again every year for the rest of their lives. So all of our botanicals come from that migratory path.
That's amazing. I had no idea. So explain why the blue bottle and your logo is really unique and has meaning behind it.
Oh, thank you. Marsh and I were on a camping trip about 5 or 6 years ago with our two daughters. We have two little girls. They were 7 and 8 at the time. And we were up in Big Sur. We were on a migratory path of our own. We were on a road trip, and we got one of those incredible camping sites that you have to wake up 6 months before at 6 a.m. to call in to try to, reserve this camping site. It's right on a cliff edge above an area called McQuay Falls, which is an image that is pretty synonymous with Big Sur. There's a fresh waterfall that flows right into the ocean in a lagoon there. And we were in this beautiful place overlooking the ocean and watching our girls play. And we started to have the kind of conversations that you have when you're away from your job and your chores at home and you're with family and friends. And we looked at each other and we said, what are we doing with our lives? We had our own, quote, successful careers. But when we looked at our girls, we were thinking, what could we do that would, make them really proud? What are we doing with our time on this planet that's going to make a positive impact and leave a legacy for our family? And that's really where the conversation started. The ocean is really important to us. The ocean, environmental conservation and animal conservation. Our family spends a lot of time outside. We live a couple blocks from the ocean. We're always in the water. And thinking about, on that spot, we also wanted to, in a taste experience and a sensory experience, bring people back to that moment in Big Sur. So that's really where the color of the bottle comes from, is that bay in the ocean there in Big Sur. That's what the color of the water looks like there.
That's incredible that it's that color. I hope that was the answer, that there was a water that beautiful. And so it's a map, the label, the whale tail is also a map in a way.
Yeah, definitely. So we have topographic kind of iconography throughout the bottle, but you'll see the Pacific coast, the West Coast reflected there in the whale tail. And what that really represents is a couple of different things. This gin is inspired by the gray whale's 12,000-mile migratory journey up and down the coast every year. But then also, on the back of the bottle, one of the copy lines we say is enjoy the journey, because it's really also about the taste experience of the journey. You're able to taste your way along the Pacific coastline and pick out each one of those unique botanicals, but also enjoy the journey is really a state of mind. About being in the present and not being so focused on the destination, but being in the present moment and enjoying your friends and family around you and, being outside in incredible places like that.
Well, that was a really good, deep question you asked then that led to a lot. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what your backgrounds were, where you were at, in your lives at that time when you asked those big questions. But first, let's focus in on gin. Why did you focus in on gin in particular?
Well, gin is vodka with flavor. That's really all it is. It's the original flavored vodka. And the one flavor that is synonymous with all gins is the juniper. The juniper berry is a beautiful little berry that was kind of made popular. Gosh, I mean, it's been generations, and Persian Empire was using it in multiple iterations, and so were the Roman Empire. I mean, Pliny the Elder mentions it an awful lot in his wonderful encyclopedia. But this little juniper flavor profile, all we do, gin is, like I said, it's vodka with flavor. So all of it just gave us this wonderful, unique opportunity to taste your way along the Pacific, as Jan just mentioned, but to encapsulate the entire Californian coastline and honor this beautiful gray whale. Because, like I said, if we just have that base spirit of, and our base spirit is corn, by the way, and the 6 ingredients that go into making our gin are juniper berries, limes, fir trees, sea kelp, mint, and almonds, and they're all mentioned on the front of the bottle exactly where each one of these originate from. So, and on top of that, Jen and I were huge gin fans anyway. And when you really think about it, the number one spirit in America is vodka by far, but vodka is supposed to be tasteless and flavorless. And of course, they all taste and have some slight flavor profiles that are different, but the whole point of it is to kind of be neutral. And we just laugh about this because we go, well, gosh, gin is your rosemary encrusted herbaceous bread, and vodka can be kind of thought of as Wonder Bread. And why are we not drinking more of this wonderful herbaceous bread? And so we knew that a tidal wave was probably going to come to the US. And that's really where it all started from. Back in 2016 on this camping trip, we ended up, selling our house and going all chips in on this little gray whale gin thing, and launched it a couple years later in 2018, really.
Wow. I think I know the answer to this question of what's unique about what you do. Would you say it is the botanicals that you choose?
Oh yeah, 100%. We took a long time to get this right. Look, I was hosting Food Network shows at the time, and I had a lot of friends that were actually, both Jan and I have a lot of friends that are chefs and tastemakers, sommeliers, and we kind of went at making the flavor profile without any ego. We wanted to be a true meritocracy. Like, what is the greatest tasting gin that could truly honor this gray whale? And to say it took 2 years and 152 recipes is no understatement. I basically went around the world to learn how to distill. Jan took the lead on the marketing communications, the branding. This bottle is what initially attracted your attention. And the reason we are talking is because you tried it and you loved the gin. So there is a symbiotic relationship with the way you look at things and the way you taste things and experience things. So I saw the bottle long before we had the liquid finalized, and I felt tremendous pressure to get a liquid that lived up to this beautiful pack. Obviously, the juniper berries are really important and paramount, but the base spirit, let's talk about that for a second. We decided on a 6 times distilled corn-based distillate because it had this wonderful mouthfeel. It was slightly sweet, yet it was incredibly balanced, and it gave it a wonderful blank canvas to allow the botanicals to truly shine. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So just so your listeners understand how you make gin, you start out with that 6 times distilled base distillate, or whatever your base distillate might be. And a base distillate is where you've taken whatever, let's call it wine, or in our case, corn. We've fermented the corn, and the corn is then, we've made it essentially a corn beer, if you like, which is about 10% alcohol. We distill that. We're only getting the 10% alcohol out of there. So once it's up to 95% alcohol, now it's quote unquote called vodka. But we do one more distillation with that distillate, and we add the botanicals either in solution or above the solution. It's actually a combination of both for us. So if you think of gin as being a vodka tea, if you like, with these botanicals, and botanicals are things that are grown. Again, for your listeners, there's things like the sea kelp in there that adds an earthy umami-ness. The mint in there really brings out a sweetness. The almonds, oh my goodness, gives this creamy, delicate mouthfeel that is just unlike any other gin in the world. And for us, we didn't want to make another London Dry. This is we joke about this, but it's kind of a Californian dry, because we do the same technique as a London dry, yet we're using botanicals from California that are different, hand zested limes as opposed to the traditional dried limes and fir trees. Anyway, that's really what makes our gin totally unique.
I think one of the reasons it's unique as well is, pardon the pun, but Marsh and I were really fish out of water in the spirits industry. We didn't have a background in that. We were coming at it from a place of, we love gin and we really wanted to tell a story with our gin. And because of that, we were choosing botanicals that maybe historically weren't used in gin before, or, some people who have a lot of experience in gin who were advising us, said, that sounds crazy. I don't think you should try that one. And we just passionately went after what would really take people to this place with us, what would tell the story. So botanicals like sea kelp and almonds, those were some of the last botanicals we added. They're not usually, used in gins. And that's what makes it so unique.
Yeah, first of all, it's funny that you said what you did about not going into it, not knowing things, because I like to say that I'm happily naive about a lot of things, and I like to keep it that way because that creates my sense of wonder about things, which, I think comes through in what we do with Real Food Traveler. But the fact that you sea kelp, I mean, I'd never heard of that, and talk about authentic flavors of where you travel, which is what we're all about. That's amazing. You're literally tasting the flavors of the California coast in that. And Marsha, I'm sure you remember when you hadn't told me what the botanicals were yet. You just said, just have a sip. And I did, and expecting wonderful juniper flavors, which I normally love and expect in gin, but I mean, my eyes popped open. It was something so different and so light and lovely and delicious, and it totally meshed with the bottle, and that color. I mean, it was like the full ocean experience. So that's so interesting to hear that you just went with what you thought would be wonderful and not what the experts were telling you you should or shouldn't do.
Well, thank you. I think, look, gin lovers love it because it really is juniper forward. And yet our juniper is actually a different strain. It's Juniperus californicus, which has much more of a cedar component to your traditional London dries and even the new American gins that use a lot of Italian and Macedonian juniper berries. So we wanted to put an element of California in this glass. So we actually used Thomas Keller's professional forager to go out and get the juniper berries for us up in the Big Sur region. And with the fires that are happening, it's proving more and more challenging. So we're actually having a lot of fun finding new areas to pick these juniper berries. Just coming up with that combination. The goal for us was to, like we have said many times, taste your way along the Pacific, and it's easy to say it, but it's really difficult to get something incredibly balanced. And we were, I mentioned we have a lot of chef friends and sommelier friends. So we did a lot of focus groups and taste tests, blind taste tests, where we curate a bunch of people around a table and not tell them what is what. And usually, we're putting one or two of the bigger name gins on the table, as well as a couple of our distillations. And at the beginning, of course, the big name gins were winning the blind taste test, but then it started to become quite apparent that we were getting very close, that we would win like 90% of the time. And once that got up to 100% of the time, then we went, this is the flavor profile of Grey Whale Gin. We've got it. And that's when we stopped. We stopped R&Ding at that point.
Right. And so you have one product, the gin, or do you have, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
just the Grey Whale Gin. And really why? Because we get asked this quite often. And most distilleries start out by putting the whiskey in a barrel and allowing it to age. Whiskey takes time to age. So yeah, we have to pay the bills. So we're going to go and make a vodka or a gin. That's typically the way it's done. For us, it was always about making gin. And we wanted to create the next great American gin that could stand up against some of these London dries and the Scottish gins like Hendrick's that have done such great things for the gin category. And I'm really pleased with all of the other gins that are coming out now, because you can truly taste your way around the world. And I think there's really a ginaissance happening in this country. And And around the world, if you ever go to Spain, when the world opens up again, they are in love with gin. Gin is their number one spirit by far. And you have this incredible experience out there where they will give you a book, like a menu book that is just full of gins, maybe 100, 150 gins. And each one of them has a recommended tonic. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense because 3/4 of the drink is gin as tonic. So it makes more sense to have a tonic that's tailored specifically to your gin. It's just not all exactly the same. And it doesn't have to be just gin and tonic, by the way. I think there's a classic cocktail revival that's happening in this country too, that, you know, some of the cooler bars in New York City and all throughout the country, actually. And even, in fact, all over Denver, we were really blown away where you and I met. And at Top Taco, we went to a bunch of phenomenal cocktail bars that, you know, the sliver of vodka behind the bar was really surprising. And the dominant spirits were gin and whiskeys. Very few vodkas behind the bar, which was really pleasing for us. It just sort of indicated where the taste buds are going.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's pleasing for me too as a as a gin fan. Your website gives a great overview of the whole process of making your gin, and I know you touched on that a little bit, but can you explain a little bit more about how that works? In particular, I noticed this beautiful kind of tea bag kind of thing of the botanicals, and I'd like to know how that is used, and moreover, I want to know what happens to it afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the gin is what's called London Dry. That's a technique, by the way. So how London Dry gins are made is we take a base spirit. So think 50% alcohol, very clean base spirit, which in our case is a 6 times distilled corn-based distillate. We pour that into a giant copper pot. It's called a pot still, and it has a steam jacket around it. And all of our dried botanicals, so that would be the juniper berries, the almonds, and the sea kelp, they go directly into the pot still. We literally pour it through a porthole and pour it directly into the pot. The stuff that you're referring to in that beautiful tea bag is called a vapor extraction basket. And we put our hand-zested limes in there, the deneedled fir needles, and the fresh mint go into this kind of it looks like a giant tea bag, if you like. For your listeners, it's probably about 2 feet by 2 feet. We tie the very bottom of it. It's a net, and then we tie the top. And we attach that to a little pulley system that we pull up into the helmet of the pot still. So then we heat the exterior jacket up, the jacket of the pot still, which inevitably boils the ethanol, the base spirit. And if you think about what's happening now, the alcohol is robustly extracting the dried botanicals. So those juniper berries, the almonds, and the sea kelp are releasing these wonderful essential oils. And once it gets hot enough that it starts to boil, the vapor, the liquid turns into a gas, basic chemistry, and it will start to rise. And as it's rising, it starts to pass over that hovering vapor extraction basket. And you get a much more delicate extraction of the citrus, the limes, the fir trees, and the mint. And it comes across a little arm. It's called a line arm. And then at the other end, we condense it. We turn it back into a liquid. And that beautiful going from a liquid to a gas back to a liquid again is called distillation. We've separated the alcohol from the residual 50% water that's left in the pot still. And what you get at the other end is a very high proof version of our gin. And all we do with it is water it down to 43% alcohol or 86 proof. And that is it. We don't do anything else to it. We're not adding any flavors afterwards. We're not doing anything nefarious to it. It literally has a 2-day attenuation process, which is just allowing it to sit in a steel drum to just relax and calm down for a minute, because it's just gone through a very volatile experience. And then we put it into the bottles. And so when you pop that cap, you really do get to taste those fresh botanicals as we intended to kind of taste your way along that Pacific.
Okay, so it never gets submerged, that vapor extraction bag. It is purely just vapor extraction, not
Yes,
not
it is.
boiling
Yeah,
it.
just exactly right. Just a vapor extraction on the basket at the top. The botanicals that are in solution, obviously, they are getting a much more robust extraction, and that's really through trial and error for Jan and I. Some gins are 100% vapor extracted, and some gins are 100% in solution. There are some other ones that they macerate. Macerate means, if you think about like a tea bag in the base spirit, they leave it there for a week and then they distill it. So there's multiple ways to create gin, but our technique is a combination of in solution vapor extraction, and it is quote unquote the London dry technique. It's the most authentic, original way to make gin, if you like, but we use different botanicals.
Right, right. So what do you do with the contents of the bag when you're all
I
done?
wish I had a wonderful answer, like we feed it to pigs and they turn into, we don't do anything with it, unfortunately. It's so spent at that point, there would be very little nutritional value for anything. And you'd be very surprised that there actually isn't an awful lot of botanicals that we use. So a normal pot still for us, it's a 2,000 liter Carl pot still, which is a German pot still. We end up with maybe, I don't know how to describe size-wise, like a carrier bag that you may take to a grocery store full of botanicals. About that, that's all that we use in a batch that would probably fill approximately 300, 400 cases of gin.
Oh, wow.
So surprisingly little.
Right.
I mean, to give you a little bit more insight, the almonds, for example, we use about a pint of almonds.
Okay. All right. That's really interesting. So let's go back to that day that you were watching the girls play and you started having these big life questions. What were you both doing professionally at that time?
I was a creative director in marketing and advertising. I was the executive creative director of the brand content studio at Fox. And before that, I had been, spent 20 years working for traditional agencies, a lot of CPG work directly to consumers.
I was hosting TV shows and acting in all sorts of everything from commercials to television. I had a Geico commercial that was running at the time where I'm beating up bad guys, and then my mom calls and tells me the squirrels are back in the attic. But
oh yeah, I love that one.
it was a fun commercial. So yeah, if any of your listeners are going, well, who is this? That was me. Probably chances are, if you're like anybody else, you remember the mom, you don't really remember the secret agent guy, but that's me. And I had a show on the Food Network called Extreme Chef, which was a ton of fun. In hindsight, I think that the show would have done better had it been on like a CBS or a NBC or a major network, because it was a pretty crazy show. I would basically take some executive chefs and I don't know, I'd say you've got 20 minutes to cook a fish dish and your fish are in that lake, get swimming. And they would have to dive in, go to a kayak, pull up some fish. And it was an extreme, crazy, fun, part adventure show, part cordon bleu, beautiful food show.
Yeah, Marsh and I really spent, our 20-year career each telling stories, me behind the camera and Marsh in front of the camera. And on that cliff edge, that's what we said to each other, that was our brief, was how can we combine our superpowers? We believe everybody has their own skill set and superpowers, and how can we combine those superpowers to create something that brings people joy and also makes a positive impact on the planet, thus creating this incredible purpose-driven company that our family could really be proud of. So when we're thinking about all elements of the gin, it kept coming back to telling that story and transporting people to that place on that cliffside. And I think that's something that the bottle does when you look at it is, whenever people are around a body of water, it's actually a phenomenon. It's called the blue mind. When people are around a body of water, they get calm and peaceful and in a blissful state. And, we hope that that's what people feel when they see the bottle on the shelf, but also they're transported to that place when they taste the gin.
Well, definitely worked for me perfectly. I'm a perfect test case for you. So the distillery you mentioned, did that and Gray Whale Gin happen simultaneously?
Yeah, well, let's take a step back. When we first had that conversation, Jan and I got in the car, and our kids are 5 and 7 at the time. So they were both passed out asleep in the back of the car as we're driving back home. And the cell service kicked in, and Jan was searching on GoDaddy for goldenstatedistillery.com, and surprisingly enough, it was there. And so we bought it literally on that journey home. And 4 months later, we sold our house to launch Grey Whale Gin, and didn't really know an awful lot about it, but we went all over the world to learn how to distill, met with a bunch of different distillery, actually over 50 distilleries, and asked questions. So what's it like? And there's a big reason that we only have only had at the time 500 distilleries in this country. And to put it into perspective, by the way, Austria, small European country with 5.8 million people as the population in Austria, they have 20,000 distilleries. We have 320 million people, and we've only got 500 distilleries. So something was off. We knew that this was apparent. Then it doesn't take long to figure out that, oh, well, it was prohibition back in the 30s when we banned alcohol. We put some really draconian laws in place when we repealed the prohibition era. So essentially what happens is we have something called a three-tiered system. That means that if you make the alcohol, you have to sell it to a middleman called a wholesaler, and the wholesaler has to sell it to a retailer, and the retailer then has to sell it to the public. But those three tiers, or those three distinct steps, were designed in a way that you could not know anybody in each of these tiers. So I couldn't own a distillery and Jan owns a wholesaler. We have to be at least not friends. Like it's a very strange system. So that, on top of the fact that it costs about $2 million to start a distillery, led us to the belief that, well, even if we do sell our house, we still don't have enough money to start a distillery. So we went off and actually found a partner who produces the alcohol for us. So we have what's called a rotating proprietorship. So even though it says Golden State Distillery on the label, this distillery physically does not belong to us until we go into the actual distillery itself, and they hand over the keys, and now it's suddenly called Golden State Distillery because that's what's being produced at that point. But it was something that we had to kind of pioneer and figure out, and because there was no handbook on this, but where there's a will, there's always a way. And I guess, in the gig economy, it kind of inspired us that, there's an awful lot of, like WeWork, for example, the shared office space. I don't need to buy a building. I can just rent it for a while. And that just sort of made sense for us because we didn't know if Grey Whale was going to be a success. We hoped it was going to be a success. And at some point we may well own our own distillery, but for right now, it just makes an awful lot of sense to use somebody else's facility.
And also in that year of fact finding and meeting all of those distillers and hearing, their pain points and some of the challenges that they met, it was also very evident to us the environmental impact of all of these different distillers building their own distilleries. So we kept kind of coming back to the table and thinking about, is there another way to go? And the partner that we used is actually one of the distillers that we interviewed that year, who was very open source and gave us feedback. And so that journey brought us to our partner.
That's great. I love when potential problems end up becoming a solution like that.
Yes.
So that's great. Yeah. Had you ever worked together before at all?
Yes, we had. We produced some shows together, with Marsh as a producer and I as creative. We came up with some ideas for reality and scripted shows, and we did some pilots together and, went around Hollywood and pitched those shows and had great experience there. And then we also came up with, just 3 or 4 months into some other consumer ideas and, abandoned them 3 or 4 months in because we just didn't have the passion for them after we jumped in and did our due diligence about the opportunity. So this is absolutely the most successful one that we've done together, but we've been working together for probably 15 years now.
Good. Starting a business is difficult anyway, but you're going into business with your partner in life and in love. And I understand that you both had like the ideal talents to bring together. And that was really serendipitous. How do you have any tips for, people like me? I work with my husband too. Do you have any tips for how you balance who does what and to not, kind of be at each other's throats all the time, which actually is a good question for so many of us who are still working from home with our partners, even not in the same business, but in the same house.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of, in hindsight, lots of tips and lots of things that we did right. And I think the biggest one is staying in your lane. For example, Jan is a master marketeer, branding guru. I mean, she's just an instinctive creative director, and yet there is no ego there. If I see something and I go, it doesn't feel right, and she'll, oh, okay, and we unpack it. We try to, just be as open source as possible. But we really respect each other's vision and voice. And I think this is funny, but I think the biggest motivator to not argue is sell your house. You're both really motivated to make this thing work. There was literally no time that we ever thought, it's too hard, let's just forget it. It just had to succeed. I mean, we didn't have a marketing budget, for example. The front of this bottle tells our entire story. It needed to literally pull itself off the shelf. It needed to jump into your basket. And that's kind of what's been happening. With minimal effort from us, we were starting to see that grocery stores or little liquor stores, they were saying, wow, this gin is really selling. What are you guys doing for marketing? And we're like, what do you mean? We don't have money for marketing. we just started. And then, well, whatever is happening, people are coming in and going, oh, that beautiful blue bottle, and they're walking out with it. It's selling like half as much as our big name brands. And for a brand that has zero marketing awareness, is a testament to why this blue bottle with the whale tail on it attracted your attention. And then they try it, and they're coming in to buy another one. So fingers crossed that this continues.
To add to the sentiment that Marsh said, I think it's, really taking the time and patience to be respectful. The example that Marsh used was perfect because, both of us coming from different areas, Marsh's culinary and science background and my marketing, when you've worked in an area for 20 years, then you have your own bias and you kind of just make assumptions and move on to the next. So it's incredibly powerful to have a partner who hasn't spent their life doing that, because then they come in with that new point of view, and then having, the respect to step back and say, wow, I never thought about it that way. I'm still learning things. And that's how we're innovative. And the same with Marsh, taking the lead with distilling, and also obviously like sales as well. I was still working my day job, and Marsh was out every day, pounding the pavement when we first started in sales. And he would always respect my point of view coming in, not knowing the science background and just coming from an instinct of a storytelling place of trying new things. I think our experience as parents has really added to that as well. When you're running your family, it's your own little business and corporation. And you start to become really in tune to sensing when your partner needs a break and when they've had too much, and then one of you just steps up and does a bit more, and then the other one can take a break. And I think that, having babies, toddlers really, really teaches you to recognize that dynamic in each other.
Yeah, I agree completely. And it's interesting because you touched again on that naivete, that not knowing things and how that can be a benefit. You said you sold your house, which, is intriguing enough, but you sold your house when you had kids, and are wanting to have a nice stable home for them. So tell me a little bit more about that and maybe some of the other struggles that you encountered when you were first getting going.
Well, it never ever felt like a risk, is simply how I felt about it. We had a concept. We knew it was an addressable market that was gigantic in the United States. And if this thing even was remotely successful, it could change our lives, and more importantly, change the lives or change the coastline of California. Our partnership with Oceana was a huge part of that motivation early on. The why are we doing this? And our kids are watching mommy and daddy launch a booze business, but it's not just a booze business. This is a company that protects and preserves the world's oceans through our support of Oceana and 1% for the Planet. And the kids got it. And, you know, we were witnessing our children, you know, we would watch an awful lot of Shark Tank when we were starting out. And Lila at one point, you don't realize that they're little sponges, but she jumped up and said, "Oh my gosh, that valuation's crazy," when we were watching a Shark Tank episode. And we both looked at each other and went, what are you talking about? Well, I mean, they haven't even done sales. Like, how can they possibly value it at that? And it just killed us. But we were laughing so hard because they are little sponges. And since then, they've come up with business ideas themselves. And each one of them has a philanthropic backbone. So whatever they're watching us do, they're hopefully learning the right way to, who knows if it's the right way, but it feels like the right way to run a business with some social responsibility. But
I'd say in some ways,
Yeah.
when we were making that decision, what was scarier was not selling the house and jumping in.
yeah,
Because-
I agree.
Yeah, when you came back to that, you know, conversation on the cliff edge of, if we don't take this risk, you know, if we continue to work for corporate America, not be the master of our own destiny, it puts us in a place where we're not going to be able to make like really big, significant impact on the environment. And we're not using our time well on this planet. And we're not setting a great example for the kids. And things would have just moved on as they were, which was fine. But that's not the kind of example we want to set for the kids. Like, make a huge mark and do whatever you can with your time on this planet, you know, to make it a better place in some way. So I think that's what it came down for, was there was more fear in our guts not to take this leap.
Yeah, and Courtney, I would add to that we obviously, it took us 2 years to launch, and we analyzed the heck out of this. And oddly enough, neither of us are finance people at all, or really number. I have a medical physics degree, so I'm somewhat, you know, familiar with numbers, but definitely not accounting numbers. But I learned how to put together a little pro forma. And the more we kind of went back to the numbers, the more it just started to make sense, because the way I kind of justified it, and I would try to convince Jan about this, was, okay, look, if we make a bottle of gin for, I'm going to make up some numbers here, for $10, and our goal is to sell it for $40 at the liquor store. It sounds crazy, but actually it's not. There's a wholesaler involved that takes a 30% margin. There's a retailer that takes 30% margin, and then there's Uncle Sam with the federal excise taxes all baked in. You're actually only making around 60% margin, gross margin, on a $10 bottle that sells for $40, which is bananas, but it's true. And I said, well, worst case scenario, we can sell this bottle for at least $10. So we're not going to lose money. I mean, it's got intrinsic, there's gin in a glass. Let's get over ourselves. We won't lose the money. We just might not make any money. So that was the justification early on as to why we should take this huge risk. So it didn't seem, like I said earlier, it didn't seem like a risk at the time. And looking back, probably was quite a big risk, but but I'm glad we did it.
Jan, how much convincing did you need when he came to you with those conversations?
Really none at all, just because we mentioned before, you know, and just coming from a place of, well, you know, if it all goes nowhere, you know, then we just go back to like these fun creative careers we've been blessed with, and, you know, and we'll make it again. So it made sense to me.
Right. Yeah. So talk about the reason why it's so important to you both to be benefiting the world's oceans. And are you able to see at this point, you know, that you're having a positive effect, or is it too soon to tell?
Yeah, no, we very lucky insofar as we did a lot of research early on into why we picked Oceana. There's an awful lot of ocean themed conservation groups like Heal the Bay, Surfrider Foundation, and a million in between. But Oceana is making legislative change at the international and federal level. So they have offices in Washington, D.C., for example, and they're really involved with, like I said, legislative change. So one of the specific things that we were very proud of is our support of Oceana in banning something called drift gillnet fishing. Drift gillnets, for folks that don't know what they are, they're these 2-mile walls of death, if you like. They're 2 miles long, 200 meters deep, 200 yards deep. And the net is, it has kind of big holes, about a 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot holes in this net. So the theory is that smaller fish should be able to swim right through them, yet the big fish like swordfish are going to get caught. And they're called gill nets because the fish swim through them and then get their gills caught in these nets. And that's how they catch swordfish. And yet what was crazy is California was the last state to ban this. Every other state had banned it. And we just were scratching our heads going, are you kidding me? The wonderful tree-hugging nation of California is the only state left that still has this practice. So we partnered with Oceana. We helped them put together a little video. We actually took one of their scientists down to San Ignacio Bay, and we recorded this beautiful little video that is on their website right now. And we helped raise $2 million, and we enacted a ban through our former governor, Jerry Brown, and that ban is actually taken effect right now. So we are actually seeing real change because of our little support of Oceana, and we're going to continue. You know, now that we're getting these nets out of the water, it's, by the way, this is an important fact. We're not putting the fishermen out of jobs. Those fishermen in other states use something called deep set buoy gear, and that is, instead of a net, they use hooks that go to the bottom of the ocean, and these hooks have a very, very high likelihood of only catching swordfish because of the depth that they're at, et cetera. They're using a little bit more technology. But we wanted to be in a position where we weren't just putting these guys out of business. So they have a buyback program. I believe it was $100,000. They get to give up their fishing net, and they get right at the front of the line to get a new license for this deep set buoy gear. And that $100,000 is supposed to offset the cost of them buying the new gear. So nobody was going to go out of work. And I think that's what Jerry Brown was, the former governor, was so excited about. Well, this seems like a win-win situation. And that's part of the partnership with Oceana, that they're constantly thinking about those things. And going forward, we've got our eyes set on vertical entanglement issues. So lobster pots, for example. You understand that these beautiful creatures, these gray whales and other whales, the blues and humpbacks, they're all going up and down our coastline. They're incredibly powerful creatures. So if they do get entangled with a lobster pot, well, they can easily carry that thing for 18 months, 2 years. But what happens is it's a drag. It's a drag weight on that tail. So they start to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And it's a very slow and painful death for them because they can't feed as well, they can't breathe as well, and ultimately they succumb to lobster pot entanglement. So there is a new solution that's out there, and we're trying to find a way to work with Oceana to raise awareness for this and enact bans for lobster pots. But what it is essentially no line. So you throw your lobster pot down into the area that you usually fish or lobster catch, I guess. And you come back the next day or a day, 2 days later, or however long you want to leave it, and you use your cell phone to geolocate where you were. You press one button and it fires a little buoy from that lobster pot, and it floats right to the surface. You go right up to that buoy, grab it and reel it in. So there would be no lines in that way, which is very simple technology that existed 20 years ago, but yet it's now really accessible because of these handheld cell phones. So that's really where we're going for our future, and also the reforestation of kelp forests off the coast of California. We've got a very invasive species of purple sea urchins coming in, and they're decimating our forests. And those forests are so crucial to human existence that 70% of the breathable oxygen on planet Earth comes from phytoplanktons and these wonderful sea kelp forests. So as much as we think the Amazon rainforest is crucial, well, that's really only 30 or so % of our breathable oxygen on planet Earth. The rest of it comes from our oceans. So it's crucial that we protect them.
Oh, it's just fascinating, and it blows my mind that you could do fishing with a cell phone. I mean, that's incredible. Yeah. So your base spirit, let's talk about that for a minute. It's gluten-free, I saw on your website. Is that something that just you do, or are base spirits always gluten-free?
Well, it's corn base. So corn is gluten-free inevitably, but the gluten molecule rarely comes through on the line arm when you distill a product. So usually, I mean, I would not go so far as to say all distilled products are gluten-free, because I think the Celiac Society would fight me on that one. But in my opinion, nearly all distilled spirits that have been distilled to a high enough alcohol content are gluten-free. But yes, we can legally call ours gluten-free because it comes from corn.
Okay. All right. And so therefore they're also vegan and vegetarian?
Correct. Yes, because we do not have any animal products in this whatsoever. And yes, it's all botanical is a vegetable. It's well, not necessarily always a vegetable. I mean, you could use fruit, but it's a product that is grown in the ground, or in our case in the ocean with the sea kelp.
Right. Right. So when you dream about where this business could go, what do you envision?
Global domination, right?
Yeah.
No, we just want the world to taste the Pacific in a glass. And if our little gin can excite people to try something new and taste the Pacific coast in a glass, then that's the goal. But for us, we're just going to keep doing this until nobody wants to drink it anymore, which hopefully will be never.
And I think our goal is to excite people about making an impact in the environment or for animal conservation. It can be, in really small ways like this, like just making, a conscious purchase and thinking about what you're doing, or small changes at home as well. So when we think about what Marsh jokes about global domination, that's when we get really excited thinking about, more work that we're going to be able to do with Oceania and really, change and move the tides here with what's happening with ocean conservation.
Right. Right. It interested me too when you explained that it starts out as vodka, because I run into people all the time, because I do love gin, who say, "Oh, I can't drink gin. I have, a bad experience with it. I just do vodka." I'm sure you hear that too. What do you say when people say that to
I
you?
say, well, usually the reason you've had a bad hangover has been because, or had a bad experience, is because you drank too much of it. Ethanol is ethanol. And that's in beer, it's in wine, it's in vodka, it's in gin and tequila and every other spirit in between. It's the reason we drink alcohol. A, social aspect. B, it has an inebriating feeling. It loosens people up. That's why we drink alcohol. So what is it about gin, the original flavored vodka? I think it was because it tasted so good that people drank a lot of it. And when you drink too much of anything, it can give you a bad feeling. And most people that I've found that say, "Oh, I don't drink gin anymore because I had a bad experience," it was usually when they were very young, either at university or sometime in their early 20s, where they overindulged in gin, and it can put people off that way. But
Or they had their father's or their grandfather's gin, and it had a much higher concentration of juniper and was less balanced than some of the modern gins too. So they're always really surprised when they try our gin.
Yeah, I've had a lot of whiskey drinkers and tequila drinkers more recently that come and try this gin, and they go, "Oh my gosh, I can actually just drink this on the rocks. This is incredible." And it's funny, Courtney, because I still love doing in-store tastings as much as I can. And I was at a Whole Foods not long ago, where I'm asking folks when they walk in the door, say, "Oh, we have this wonderful Californian craft gin. Would you like to try some?" And they go, "Oh, gin, no, no, no." And I go, "Well, I also have this wonderful Californian craft juniper vodka, if you'd like to try that." And they stop and go, "Ooh, that sounds delicious. Yeah, I'll try juniper vodka." And they come up and have a little taste. And then I go, "Just want to let you know that juniper vodka is actually called gin." And I mean, it's funny. That was one of the names we toyed with. It was going to be called California Gray Whale Juniper Vodka, because we knew that people had that stigma to gin. But if we remove just one botanical, the juniper berries, we would legally have to call this vodka. So it's just funny to me that we have a whole distinct category because of it.
When you tell them that at Whole Foods, do they get mad at you, or? Are they
No, their
fans?
mind is blown. They're like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I never knew that. I always thought it was a spirit derived purely from juniper berries. They didn't know that it was a clean distilled spirit that had a flavor profile that was added juniper in some way, shape, or form.
I think it inspires them too, because they're empowered. Then they have that moment of discovery, and then they can take that gin to, the next dinner party or a gathering with friends and say, did you guys know that actually gin is just flavored vodka, the OG flavored vodka? So they feel like they're bringing that new knowledge to their friends, and they can be the cool cocktail culture person at the table.
Right. And on your website, you have they're beautiful to look at cocktails, but really interesting sounding recipes. Who came up with those?
Oh, it was a collaboration of bartenders, tastemakers. Our brand ambassador, Matt Cleet, has been coming up with a lot of those wonderful cocktails. We're very excited. We have a new brand ambassador just brought on board, Zach Berger. He's incredible. He's going to be coming up with a lot more cocktails too. So, but yeah,
and Marsh and I mean, the early ones were Marsh and I's favorite cocktails and things that we were making at home. And,
yeah, like the whale hello there.
Yeah, and friends of ours who are photographers. Were shooting those images for us. For cases of gin. That's really how it started, was just a collaboration of all of our friends and supporters.
Yeah. So because your gin does have a very distinct, but not overpowering, just distinct flavor, I'm going to assume that people are going to buy a lot of your gin after listening to this podcast. So when they do, and they're trying to come up with cocktails on their own, because of all that mix of botanicals, are there certain considerations that people need to take into mind when deciding what to combine it with, if you're not just doing, a gin and tonic?
Well, good question. For us, it was always about a super balanced gin. So, for example, I was just in New York last week, meeting with some of the hottest cocktail mixologists in the world, and it's remarkable what they all get out of the gin. And what I mean is, they will all say, yes, incredibly balanced. The viscosity of the almonds gives it such a creamy mouthfeel. The kombu sea kelp has that earthy umami-ness in there that I'm just so excited about. And the juniper is loud and proud, but there's also a nice citrus component. So if, for example, you're looking for a classic cocktail, you may want to go down an Army-Navy route, which is essentially just lemon juice, simple syrup, but with orgeat almond simple syrup. And it's got this wonderful little almondy backbone with a lemon backbone. It's just fabulous. But then the gin fizzes are great, and the gimlets are great. And this gin, because it's so balanced, can make an incredible martini. Men's Health voted it the #1 martini gin in the world, and we're just thrilled about that. But I think whatever you're looking to create and enact, you can absolutely swap out vodka for gin. So think about Bloody Mary, for example. That there is a version of it with when you just replace the vodka for gin, and it's called Red Snapper. Even a Cosmo, let's go back to Sex and the City. You can just swap out the gin, and it has infinitely more flavor profiles. There are multiple different iterations of gin too. There's a more sweeter version called the Old Tom style. Ours is just really in the middle. It's very balanced. It's a good gin. If you've never had gin before, I'd recommend, going down the old school route of, educate yourself on a Beefeater. That's a classic London Dry, or Tanqueray. There's a whole bunch of different wonderful gins. And then Hendrick's is a fabulous gin that really kind of kicked off this craft culture. I'd recommend you try that. And then come to the US and try a little Gray Whale, and you'll see the huge iteration and difference. And I think, inevitable trajectory of where I think gin is going to go. We're going to be able to taste our way around the whole world. That's what I get excited about with these new distilleries popping up all over the world, is I get to taste hopefully I get to taste your area, throughout the world.
Right. Is there a gin version of Terroir?
Yeah.
What's it called?
Terroir. Yeah. Terroir exists in the wine world, where we go, oh my gosh, that little patch of the vineyard gets all the sun, And that's where our reserve grapes come from. And we bottle it and we charge an inordinate amount of money. For us, we kind of had that word in the back of our mind, terroir, taste your way along the Pacific. So this unique combination of botanicals that we use, that's really what we were trying to go for and try to kind of pioneer a little bit here, because most of the gins tend to be global. They tend to source botanicals from all over the world, whether it be Italian juniper or I don't know, Algerian angelica root and orris root and all these wonderful herbs and spices. And you got to remember, that's where gin really came from back in the 1700s, the 1600s, when the Dutch came over to the UK and they brought this spirit called Genever, and they were using a spirit that was steeped in juniper berries to mask the poor distillation qualities. And it had a slight woodsy component because it was kept in barrels. That's really where all of this came from. And then the British started to make their own gins, and with the East Indian Trading Company that would go all over the world and bring back dried spices, because you couldn't bring back fresh. Everything had to be dried. So that's why a lot of the old school English London dries and Scottish gins taste kind of similar, because they're using a lot of dried botanicals, and that's all that was available then. So now we can use fresh limes and fresh sea kelp that we end up drying. But it is, if you follow us on Instagram, if any of your listeners are out there, just go to Grey Whale Gin, Grey with an A, on Insta, and you'll be able to see Jen and I hand foraging the sea kelp. And yeah, it's a different feeling when you're using fresh.
Well, and you're also, there's the term mirar too for things that are coming from the oceans. You're mixing that with, having the sea kelp in there. So that's extra interesting. So with you guys in the foraging on your website, and by the way, people will see this, but your website has the same beautiful vibe as the bottles. So Jan, congratulations. Great job doing that. I know that's you. But you show yourselves going around in that cute VW bus. So is that for real? Do you really do that?
Yes.
It's parked up outside of our house right now. Yeah.
Oh, really? Daily drive. Yeah.
That's awesome.
We actually have two of them. We have one on the East Coast now, with our partners out there that are on a lovely tour going up all over the East Coast. So if you spot it, yeah, go say hi. And the other one is on the West Coast. So we're thrilled. We're thrilled to have two buses, and they're hard to come by. These are 50-year-old buses. So yeah, again, that's kind of part of our message. Of course, it feels California, but it's also why go out and buy a brand new one when we got an old one that's perfectly fine still.
And we take it to the grocery store, down the beach, take the kids to soccer in it. And what's so amazing about it is just an absolute energy high every time you drive that car. It's like a symbol of optimism, and you're not ready for it, but if you're at a stoplight, there people are just taking pictures of you, giving you the shaka, waving. It just makes people really happy. And so as the driver and passenger in the car, it's a joy to drive. It makes us happy driving around our community.
I bet. That's so awesome. Well, this has been fascinating, and you guys are so interesting, and I just love your gin. It really, I literally saw you from afar at a Top Taco food festival where there was a lot of booze. There were a lot of opportunities for booze. And I saw you basically from across the room, but from across the field, and just made a beeline to you because, I was drawn to it, just like you hope everybody's going to be. People are. So let's wrap up by reviewing for everybody where they can purchase your gin and learn more.
Well, you can always purchase it at any fine liquor store, hopefully. And if they don't have it, just ask them to find it. It's readily available. But if you want a store locator, just go to our website, www.greywhalegin.com. And this is a store locator.
Zip code in.
Yeah, the top right-hand corner. There's also a little merch thing there, which we don't make any money on the merch. We give 100% of proceeds to ocean conservation. You'll be able to see some of our, for example, upcycled bottles that have been turned into candles, which are gorgeous, by the way. We'll have to send you one, Courtney.
Oh, thank you.
Smells beautiful, soy wax. And yeah, on all the social media, we're on every channel. It's at Grey Whale Gin.
And thank you, Courtney, for seeing us from far away and being inspired and coming over and listening to our story.
Oh yeah, I was just totally drawn in, and then really just I could not believe the flavor. It was just so wonderful. Well, we always have an article associated with our podcasts on realfoodtraveler.com. And there we'll have some beautiful pictures so you can, even before you go by, you can see this gorgeous bottle and the cute VW bus and pictures of Marsh and Jan. And we'll also have the link to the website and to your social media too. So we'll make it super easy for people to learn more and purchase and be able to have the same kind of experience I did, just discovering. I've loved gin for years, but I have never had gin like this before, and it just was eye-opening. So thank you both so much for joining me today, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and not just for pleasure drinking, but for the world's oceans. My gosh, you're doing big wonderful things, and I really I think it's exciting that you had that moment in that epiphany on the cliffside, literally. I mean, how poignant is that to be cliffside and make a decision about making a huge change in your life and for yourselves and your family. So I'm so glad you did, for all of our sakes.
Thank you.
Thank
you so
you.
much.